I thought I was done with this topic for a little while, but unfortunately the Access media has decided it was time to rattle the cages more and now spit in the face of players yet again, so here I am. Speaking about one of the worst video game websites of all time, rivaled probably only by Kotaku in thegamer.com, a website that has routinely attacked their own readers for years while pushing progressive slop ideology nonsense 24/7. Quick lore for you first, this all began because Marek Tominsky, that's the CEO of CI Games, which makes Lords of the Fallen, declared that his next game, which is Lords of the Fallen 2, would be devoid of any politics, and it would not be pushing ugly characters. This then caused the gaming journalism sphere to lose their minds because apparently it's only wrong to do this if you go against their brand of politics. So now a new article exists which claims that Lords of the Fallen 2 will be terrible and that it is being made for the wrong crowd of players. I wish I was kidding. Here's the article. It's titled Lords of the Fallen 2 is already cementing itself as a game for all the wrong people. So very early on in this article, Jade King, who's the journalist here, who somehow survived the recent mass layoffs at the Gamer, more on that later by the way, opens their article here with this, as you can see. They claim that success stories like Baldur's Gate 3 prove that people do enjoy progressiveness, which somehow undermines and deconstructs Lords of the Fallen 2's entire design philosophy. Hilariously, this is the only game Access Media can ever really bring up as an example of progressiveness working with Baldur's Gate 3. Not realizing that the reason why that game was so successful was not only because of deep RPG mechanics and its reactive world, but because the game had real player choice, as in all those progressive elements, or about 90% if not more of it, were completely optional and players did not need to see those scenes if they didn't want to. Of course, Jade King here will not recognize that because they know this is why Baldur's Gate 3 still sold what it did, about 20 million copies so far, because it was the one unique game out of hundreds that tried this progressive approach. That worked because, again, the choice was up to you, not the developers, with how much you wanted to see of that said progressiveness. For me playing BG3, I only remember the lesbian cleric girl character with like her moon goddess girlfriend in like the second act of the game. Besides that, most quests were not really about gender or anything, but real actual problems in the world, like, goblins and demons and, things like that. But anyways, besides that one instance here, my playthrough of BG3 felt like a traditional old school RPG. I romanced Lae'zel, I saved the day, I blew up like half of the world with magic and swords and then some. But comparing this to some sort of gacha to Lords of the Fallen 2 is stupid, and Jade here knows it, but they still refuse to admit it anyways. The truth is simply that the vast majority of poor performing games, especially in a AAA to AA sense, come from games that push these progressive elements. That is not a lie or a whataboutism, it's just fact, okay? Concord is an obvious example, and people who worked on Concord are now doing that High Guard game next. And to no one's surprise, no one really seems interested really in High Guard either. Gee, I wonder why that is. It's because of something that Marek and his team at CI Games are clearly aware of. Let me spell it out for you, Jade King of the Gamer. It's called pattern recognition. You see, when you want to buy something or watch a movie or TV show, your brain will notice things that it recalls before. Crazy that I'd even need to explain this, but anyways, if your brain starts seeing things it knows are associated with other things that have sucked in the past, your brain will tell you, hey, that thing you're seeing there, yeah, that isn't good. They're doing that thing again. Remember last time when they did that? And then your brain tells you, yeah, probably best to maybe just avoid this. This is why many progressive shows have flopped, movies have failed, games have come and gone, and studios have closed down, plus mass layoffs. To make it more personal for Jade King here, your own website you work at, thegamer.com, was recently also hit with mass layoffs too. You fools lost most of your own colleagues because people were not reading or engaging with your content. You can't even deny that either. Video Games Chronicle reported on this just in October 2025. Look at it here. The Gamer website suffers widespread editorial layoffs. VGC even spoke to your former and current colleagues in gaming journalism, and here's what your own people said, as it says here, that their teams were decimated by the mass layoffs that ensued, that again happened less than 2 months ago as of this video being made anyways. Again, this is not me saying this, but your own, I guess, peers in the industry, as they say there too. You guys even knew that layoffs were coming, but even then you were still shocked with how badly it went for you guys anyway. So I am using your own website, Jade King, who, wrote this hit piece on Lords 2 in the first place, as a clear reason as to why Marek and his team that are making Lords 2 are doing what they're doing. So let me put it to you it plainly. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to be in any position that's like the gamers right now. And everyone with a healthy brain would know it would be best to not do whatever it is you guys are doing over there to ensure that they survive in this industry. Merrick, obviously, like many, wants his company to thrive and give people what they want. And your Gigabrain move here is to say that Lords 2 should not be giving people what they want, which is insane to me, but you guys have done this before. This should come as no surprise since the Gamer has wrote articles like this one a few years back, and this one's titled, "Gamers are terrible people and we should stop being okay with it." So this entire article is just the gamer Stacey Henley complaining about people like PewDiePie, iShowSpeed, and others taking extreme examples of mishaps and then labeling the entire demographic of players all around the world as somehow being like-minded. Oh, some random gamer sent death threats to a studio. This totally means now that everyone who plays games somehow agrees with them. Despite me on this channel alone dozens of times telling you guys to never harass anyone, never dox anyone, and never stoop down to the level of these weirdos because they want you to. But the gamer will never report on that. Instead, it's just all gamers are bad. We're not actually. All I want to do is play video games in peace. But it's because of websites and people like this that I have to push back the way that I do, because it only took a few years and the entire Western industry just became rampant with this sort of rhetoric from top to bottom. And because of it all, games were in a terrible place for years, and they still are to a degree too. So when the website that thinks that all gamers are racist and fascist unless they agree with your website's policies and belief systems 100% of the time, why would I now believe your hit piece on CI Games and Lords of the Fallen 1 and 2 to be anything less than disingenuous at best? Circling back to the article that inspired this video, Jade King then says that CI Games in Lords 2 is positioning itself to, as they say here, it's an existing argument that very small yet very loud corners of the game development world cling to with unwavering ignorance. They mean as in wanting games to not be political. This is not a new take or a controversial one if you just play video games like most people do. It's amazing how hellbent these people are on attacking Lords and its developers just because they want to make a game that is fun and doesn't talk down to you. Is this really the hill we want to die on, thegamer.com? Really? You know that games that aren't political do better, objectively so. Even Baldur's Gate 3 again allowed for player choice and avoided all that nonsense. Expedition 33 just won Game of the Year, another non-political game. Elden Ring was huge when it came out too, and let's be real, a lot of what Lords 2 is trying to do with their game is very similar to what FromSoft did with Elden Ring already, obviously. Elden Ring is also, if you played it, which judging by its sales numbers you probably did, devoid of political real-world nonsense too. Outside of having the body type option, the actual game's world feels completely alien and removed from our real world. The tales of characters like Marika, Millennia, Radon, Mikola, and so on in Elden Ring, to name just a few, are deeply drenched in political turmoil of kings and queens and gods and monsters. But the reason why nobody hates Elden Ring except journalists and Western devs who were jealous of its success, which I also covered on this channel by the way, was because Elden Ring uniquely, especially when it came out in 2022 during the height of DEI slop nonsense everywhere, was that Elden Ring was not trying to remind you of the real world. It was instead its own world, divorced from reality like in the good old days. True escapism, if you will, and big surprise, it broke, like I said, 25 million units sold so far and then some, spawned a multiplayer spin-off game, a whole expansion, and I have really no doubt that a sequel is being made right now too, and maybe more spin-offs, who knows. So if you look at what is considered the upper echelon of gaming with Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, Black Myth Wukong even, which also broke 20 million copies sold, Expedition 33 breaking over 5 million and counting. You look at all of these heavy hitters and more, these games that sold incredibly well and also won big, and the through line between all of them is really simple. They are all devoid of political real-world nonsense, and if you are making video games and want to turn a profit yourself, you should probably emulate the games that have become all-timers in record time instead of Concord or Dustborn. I would wager is probably a good way of doing it. I'm not saying that Lords 2 is somehow going to be the size or the scope of Elden Ring, no, but the design philosophy is clearly still there. Think of all of From Software's games which Lords obviously pulls from. None of their games are real-world political nonsense slop either. Demon's Souls is about sealing a god away. Dark Souls is about a ruined king and a dying kingdom protecting the last embers of his reign. Dark Souls 2 is about a really evil queen and giants somehow too. Dark Souls 3 is about the world basically ending. And Sekiro is about not wanting to break your controller. But none of these games are about the real world. They instead just give you escapism. And wow, look at that. They all sold in the millions, ranked in incredible reviews, and fans still play them even to this day. So naturally CI Games looked at FromSoft's pedigree and design structure the same way other developers members of like Liza P, AI Limit, or Wuchang did and went, you know what? We're also going to fill our games with aesthetically pleasing characters, fun combat, scary monsters, and not beat you over the head with messaging. But instead of praising it, these people hate it. But they really hate Lords at CI Games because their CEO is just a little bit more vocal about it. But in reality, what he and his team are doing is quite literally what every other Souls-like game has done in the past and will do in the future too when it comes to game character design and philosophy even. The gamer and people like them, they just hate CI Games because Marek Tymiński, the CEO, just said the quiet part out loud, but alright then. If we're gonna be fair, the gamer better make an article now about how Elden Ring is made for the worst people, the same way Baldur's Gate 3 is for the worst people, or Liza P even. But we both know they won't do that because they know they'll get eviscerated by their fan bases, not that it's going over well for them either with Lords right now too. Because all the comments on the gamer's own post are people not agreeing with them anyways. Look here, here's some comments from the gamers on their own article, man. One user, as you can see here, says if you don't like the game, don't buy it. The other then says, why are you guys going there cherry picking Lords while not giving the equal same amount of hate to Devil May Cry, Ninja Gaiden, Resident Evil, or Warcraft, to name just a few that do the exact same thing? Because you're cherry picking your outrage, and that's really what's happening. These people are being disingenuous. You would think that if your website just had mass layoffs and then most of your buddies got promoted to customers, you would think maybe a change in direction would be a good idea for the website to ensure that this didn't happen again in the future. But I'm convinced that the people who write at the gamer are so hateful, spiteful, and angry about anyone who disagrees with them, they'd rather burn the whole website down along with their own reputations than ever really admit that they were wrong in the first place. Again, here's more of your own commenters clowning on you guys. This guy says the whole article is disingenuous and in bad faith. The one below that says there's no problem with attractive women in games, but there is a problem with pushing ugly ones, which, I mean, kind of base, but I agree. Like, you know you're cooked when your own viewer base is grilling you like a steak at TGI Fridays. You guys are speedrunning the gamer into another mass layoff event, and you really can't blame anyone but yourselves. Like, look how bad their reading comprehension skills are, man. Jade King of the gamer that wrote this then says this: improving on these qualities would be more than enough for a sequel, but in his pursuit to remove progressive politics and ideas from the game, the CEO has only gone and made Lords of the Fallen 2 political all over again. How ironic. But no, he hasn't. The only people who made the game political are people like you, Jade, not Marek Tymiński. His entire reasoning for why Lords pivoted into what it is now is pretty simple. It was to be, just like I said, Elden Ring, Wukong, and the rest, actual pure escapism. The only people upset with this pivot are people cherry-picking their outrage for clowning on a game and studio for doing exactly what other games have already done in the past too. Also hilarious that in your own website's URL, you guys like unironically put in woke in the headline, by the way. That's incredible, really. Like, it's like telling on yourselves. The gamer's probably going to be hit with more layoffs, aren't they? I say in less than 6 months' time, they're going to get judo chopped in the throat before long by their parent company yet again. Like, look at how unwilling the gamer is to allow Lords of the Fallen 2 to just escape the culture war, as they say here. A massive post-launch update released back in April resulted in even more people picking up and enjoying the game. So it's a shame this bigoted stigma is now attached to it. What bigoted stigma are you even talking about? The only people who think Lords is bigoted is people like you, Jade, really nobody else. There's nothing bigoted about listening to player feedback and giving them what they want and then updating your game. You also just literally undid your own argument because you confirmed that due to CI Games listening to the feedback from their own players, that they were, in your own words, able to bring back thousands of players in droves across all platforms due to the massive reworking of Lords of the Fallen with their 2.0 and now 2.5 updates. So by definition, you would admit that CI Games listening to customer feedback was actually a net positive across the board, but even though you admit that it is still somehow bigoted despite you and other journalists and select players who likely think that there's also like infinity genders existing believing otherwise, I guess. So we're done with that era of stupidity, guys, by the way. We really don't have to pretend like we agree with people about these crazy concepts anymore. We can just call them nuts and vote with our wallets, which is happening, by the way, too, in droves. Marek, the CEO, then confirmed that prior to the overhaul, the studio catered to political correctness to some degree to avoid blowback from the journalists. Here's what he said. Many of you asked why the game initially had body type AB. Hexworks started early 2020 as an autonomous studio owned by CI Games. Early on, political correctness and filtering meant not every decision reached me on time. I got a lot more involved from late 2024 and now act as head of studio alongside my CEO role. Things are very different now and the studio got fully integrated. We reverted a lot of wrong decisions and will continue improving. Lords 2 is being built on real player feedback and it's crystal clear in the last two trailers. So by definition, from the CEO himself, he confirms that he tried to do it their way, I mean the journalists and the people who apparently advocate and support this sort of, I guess, like DEI wokeness, for lack of a better term, I guess, kind of thing. And then Merrick saw in real time that that wasn't working. So he then made the decision to remove that all and forgo being afraid of what these journalists think anymore, and good for him. Now the game has objectively sold way more. All of its ratings on Steam and such are much higher, and the game is alive again and then some. By definition, what happened with Lords of the Fallen from 1.0 to 2.5 is a direct response to doing it the way that journalists wanted versus the way that players wanted. That's not even up for debate. That is objectively so what has happened. So to now spin this story to somehow be CI Games as being political is just fake news at this point. Everything they are doing is to be as non-political as humanly possible. They don't want their game to be some tool for journalists to attack fans with. They just want their game, like others which have done well too, to just be a game, and that's it. It's crazy how the gamer admits this, like I showed you, but still can't wrap their head around this. It's because common sense doesn't really exist in these journalists' brains anymore. Look how disingenuous and far-reaching the gamer gets, man. Let me read you the next part. It says right here, within these posts, the CEO seems to imply that the game perhaps once included a more diverse or even realistic character creator, but anything allegedly woke or progressive was stripped out and replaced with a toolset which mostly restricts players to super buff male protagonists or gorgeous women for them to objectify. By claiming you are removing content you personally deem as political from a piece of art and replacing it with your own, you are creating a new agenda, whether you want to accept it or not. Except that's also not true at all. You're just making the assumption that the character creator is restricted in some way when it isn't. The body types option has always just been another way of saying male or female to, make a certain group of people very happy, I guess. And the only reason why they changed it, as Merrick literally just admitted to, was because of the journalists originally, because of people like you, Jade King, who tend to just clutch pearls and cry when games don't cater to your crazy needs. Plus, nobody is saying you still can't make Squidward or some other horrific, ugly monstrosities as your main character in Lords. Making goofy meme characters has always been a thing in these sorts of games, the same way you could always also make an attractive male or female character in any one of these Souls-like games since like forever. As long as they have a character creator, I mean Liza P, for example, you're not able to for obvious reasons, but Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Lords, Neo, etc., yeah, they all allow you to make your own character. So if you want to play a weird-looking genderless thing, I mean, you can go and do that if you want, but the delusion has now been removed from the top to the bottom now. You're no longer a body type, you're either male or female like you are in real life, and that probably stings to see, but too bad, it is what it is. It's always been like that for years too. Merrick literally confirms the scene here that their character creator is not just for hot characters. He explicitly states that it's to allow you to make anything that you want. Again, player choice. You want to make a hot guy or woman like you can in Baldur's Gate 3 even? Cool, go ahead. You want to make some freak who looks like it lives in a swamp with Steve Buscemi eyes? Go ahead and do that too. Literally nobody is stopping you from turning your character via the character creator into what you want it to look like in the game when you play it. Sure, maybe the presets will be traditionally stronger, attractive character designs, but those are presets. Just don't use the presets and go make your character as ugly as you want them to be. Give them a Pennywise-shaped skull if you want, with big eyeballs and a stupid smile. Really do whatever you want. It's your character. That's the point of a character creator, you morons. But the gamer then brings up Stellar Blade as some sort of gotcha against Lords of the Fallen. Let me read you this. It's a bit long, but trust me, it'll be worth it, the gamer said. It stinks of fat outrage trying desperately to sell a 7 out of 10 Souls-like by playing up the idea that the modern gaming landscape has somehow robbed straight male audiences of traditional experiences they now have a responsibility to take back. A similar thing occurred with Shift Up Stellar Blade, which was held up as a symbol of resistance in the modern culture war. The game wasn't afraid to put an incredibly gorgeous heroine front and center whose chest, butt, and overall figure existed as objects for players to obsess over and customize. There was a belief among certain audiences that video game critics and progressive gamers were looking to tear Stellar Blade down, believing it stood against the DEI agenda we'd been slowly but surely infecting the entire medium with. But instead, it reviewed incredibly well and sold millions of copies, and now a sequel is even in production. Personally, I enjoyed Stellar Blade, and even thought Eve was a fun and attractive main character with loads of cool outfits to unlock. How the revisionists revised their stances as a goalpost move. Okay, the gamer, you guys apparently never attacked or looked down on Stellar Blade fans, right? Interesting. So why did you write articles like this about Stellar Blade titled, "As if one console of Gooners wasn't enough, Stellar Blade 2 will reportedly be multi-platform"? Ah yes, the Gooners, because we can't just call them players these days. You gotta belittle them somehow, right, thegamer.com. It's not the only time he did this though. Here's another article where the gamer claims that Tides of Annihilation, another game that looks dope by the way, will actually be bad because it reminds the writer Tessa Carr of Stellar Blade. They even admit in that article that they didn't even beat Stellar Blade because they thought it was a boring and bad game despite it selling millions and people loving the game a lot. Or here, where the gamer dogpiled on Stellar Blade during that slur controversy that got patched as seen here. Yet another article, this time about Stellar Blade being uncensored, and even Jade King, the same writer of this Lord's piece, belittles players in the article for liking Eve's design too much. Here's another article from the gamer claiming that Stellar Blade's Eve is everything wrong with attractive female characters in games, but Hades 2 gets it right apparently. The game that made Athena black and the other god lady into like a fat woman, by the way. But here's another article about how the gamer thinks that players are actually cringe who if they like enjoy Stellar Blade. Like, do I need to keep going? But let's now return to what the gamer said in this Lords of the Fallen article about Stellar Blade. Because now that you can see all they did was really attack Stellar Blade before it came out and during, Jade King, who also attacked Stellar Blade as I showed you, was now using that game as some sort of gotcha against Lords of the Fallen 1 and 2. But circling back to the article at the heart of all of this, let's read that part again now with the added context of how the gamer treated Stellar Blade and its fan base as it reads. There was a belief among certain audiences that video game critics and progressive gamers were looking to tear Stellar Blade down. Oh, believing that it stood against the DEI agenda we've been slowly but surely infecting the entire medium with. Interesting, isn't that? How these types can lie the way that they do on articles like this by shifting the goalposts all the time, hoping that you don't notice, while not realizing that simple searches of their own articles of the games they claim to champion prove that just like Lords of the Fallen 2, when Stellar Blade was coming out, these same types were trying to also tear it down, belittle that fanbase as well, and call the game worse, and not understanding how to make hot characters before release. But now that it failed and Stellar Blade sold millions, became a household name, and has fans all around the world, suddenly now in this Lords article, what are you talking about? We at thegamer.com never actually attacked Stellar Blade or its fans. Like I said, these people are liars. And I didn't even use articles from other websites to disprove them either. I literally just used their own work that they publish of their own free will to prove the point here. How can people trust you guys to tell the truth when you keep revising history and how you did things the moment it's no longer in your benefit, like you literally did with Stellar Blade? This is why this article, like their own comments said, it feels like a hit piece, because it is a hit piece. There's really no point in denying this. The same way they attacked Stellar Blade, calling it fake sexy, lacking a good story, or saying that it was bad, or that one writer, Tessa Carr, saying that they dropped Stellar Blade because it was a bad game despite millions loving it and becoming the best performing Sony published game on Steam besides Helldivers 2, by the way. They will now turn around and go, oh, we love Stellar Blade. Oh, really? Yeah, I don't believe you guys either. You're snake oil salesmen at this point. And I hope that people share this video so that your reputation tanks even further, because you've been caught lying yet again. Let me read you the last two paragraphs of this article and how the gamer has failed in every way, as it reads here. And so the culture war moved on to a new target, and to this day the cycle continues. Lords of the Fallen 2 is a special case, however, because of the developers behind this sequel seem to believe that cultivating this movement is going to make their game more successful. Either that, or they truly believe in the nonsense they are spouting. This game is not about progressive politics or the agency of players regardless of their gender or their politics, but about fierce combat, uncompromisingly attractive female characters, and a world worth getting lost in. The irony is that in the CEO's laughable pursuit of stripping Lords of the Fallen 2 of every single trace of diversity, he has turned the game into an object of political ridicule long before it lands in our laps. It will be remembered for that and nothing more. You mean the same way Stellar Blade would flop was a bad game and nobody would play it after all your hit pieces you guys wrote, where you belittled fans the very same way until you were proven wrong like you usually are? Why should we believe you in this time with Lords now, with how wrong you guys have been on everything else too? Your own articles disprove yourselves. This article also disproved your own argument, like I mentioned earlier too. We are in an eternal war with social parasites who want nothing more than to ruin every game you play, to embolden these people to write more articles so they can spew their hate at the players who actually keep this industry afloat, because they don't buy anything. It's disgusting. This hit piece is going to reflect back at the gamer and not CI games, and to claim making your game not political means it is now political, that only makes sense if you're the same kind of person who unironically wrote hit pieces on Stellar Blade only to then try to pretend like you never did that in the first place either. We're not stupid, we won't forget, and all this article did prove is that the gamer is speedrunning themselves to another mass layoff, but frankly, I don't think they'll ever stop no matter how many failed careers slip through their hands. These people hate their audience, they hate games that don't bend the knee to them, they believe that they're somehow the moral arbiters of what's right while representing everything wrong with the rot in games themselves. And in the gamer's laughing pursuit of trying to strip Lords of the Fallen 2 of every single trace of decency to its players, they have turned the game into an object of what is exactly what players want long before it lands in our laps. And unlike Lords, which will be remembered as a game that was fun for fun's sake, no one will remember the gamer for anything but an activist-driven slop website that destroyed its own credibility. It will be remembered for that and nothing more.